Let's talk about the D line today. It is SNL Andrew Locker here with you, holding it down for Cody Stutz, who's taking care of some business. We've been going through the position series, breaking down all the position groups with the Texans. Today, we're going to talk about the D line, which is kind of a specialty of D'Amico Ryans. But when you divide this in half and you look at one area compared to the other, I don't know whether we call this a drop off or what, but there is definitely there's definitely a big difference between the edge guys and the interior guys when it comes to the D line. And that's what we'll talk about today. Shout out to Bob Tack for sponsoring today's segment. Let's start with a guy who, by the end of this season, it wouldn't shock me, and I don't think it would shock too many people to see him as the best player on this entire Texans team. And I'm talking about Will Anderson. Right now, we consider Derek Stingley to be the best player on this team. But Will Anderson, the arrow is pointing up when it comes to Will Anderson, perhaps more than any other player on this entire roster. He's already been Defensive Rookie of the Year. Last year, he was a Pro Bowler. You notice a change. He's much more massive now, worked out with Myles Garrett in the offseason. Will Anderson is one half of the best edge duo in the league. And the sky is the limit for Will Anderson. He's the face of the swarm. He's the face of what D'Amico Ryans wants this football team to be. And I don't want to say he controls the fate of the Texans because offensively, obviously, you have a lot of questions. You have a new offensive coordinator. You're looking for C.J. Stroud to have a better year 3 than he did year 2. But if Will Anderson, and this is going to be one of the questions we'll get to in the landlocked 5 questions about the D-line here on SNL. If Will Anderson cranks it up to where he's one of the top 5, top 4 edge guys in the league, that just increases your ceiling even more. There's going to have to be some sort of balance if the Texans want to get where they want to get. But if you have an elite edge guy, unstoppable, and we've gotten snippets of what that looks like around here, then the sky is the limit there. So Will Anderson, no brainer. It's not a matter of if he's going to be good or how much better or if he's going to get better. It's just a matter of how much better can Will Anderson get. I would buy stock in Will Anderson being potentially the best player on the team after this season. Next guy, Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter is another guy who the Texans invested heavily in, and we'll get into that in a second about just the return on investment versus, I don't want to call it the neglect of the D-line, but it's definitely different when it comes to how much they've invested. But Danielle Hunter last year, 5th time that he made the Pro Bowl, didn't miss a game, solid. The advanced stats kind of showed that the normal stats weren't the whole story. And quite frankly, the normal stats were just fine. I think they were very pleased with their investment. Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, you traded the multiple first-round picks, the second-round pick, the massive, often discussed trade. Danielle Hunter, you made him the highest-paid free agent of the Nick Caserio era, and I don't think you're complaining about that when it comes to the edge. And the Texans have invested a lot on the edge. And you hear D'Amico Ryans speak. You even hear him speaking before the draft, a draft where it didn't feel like they needed defensive linemen, and it created kind of speculation. How much is D'Amico Ryans going to invest? Is D'Amico Ryans going to invest one of these picks with all these needs on offense on an interior defensive lineman? Is there a scenario where maybe D'Amico Ryans does that? And it wasn't, quite frankly, it probably would have led to a lot of questioning about just how one-sided this football team is with D'Amico Ryans, defense versus offense. But also you would have had a lot of confidence because D'Amico Ryans has been able to make do with what he's got and get a return on investment on the edge, which is the complete opposite of what they got on the offensive line with all the investment they put in that. Now, that's one side of the story when it comes to the D-line. But typically you divide the D-line into 2 areas. You talk about your edge guys, and then you talk about your guys on the interior, the D lineman, the interior defensive lineman, which I think has been an interesting ride with D'Amico Ryans. There's a couple of things. First of all, I do think it needs to be taken into account that there were very credible reports that the Texans wanted to bring in Eric Armstead, and they wanted Eric Armstead to be a part of this squad, which would have been very expensive. I know you just saw him on NFL Network. He's the Walter Payton Man of the Year, and he's the type of guy that D'Amico would love to have. But the actual play and what he gave the Jags last year, it wasn't a very strong return on investment. So that could be kind of one of those blessings that the Texans have. But they did try to invest in Eric Armstead. Year one, you had Sheldon Rankins on the interior. He was your best interior guy. You let him go, and now he's back. And there does seem to be, when it comes to the defensive line, specifically on the interior, there does seem to be a certain comfort level in keeping guys around when it might feel appropriate to kind of churn the roster, because it does feel like they're pretty good when it comes to bringing in interior D-linemen. Mike on the chat says a healthy Rankins in the interior can be better than last year. Oh yeah, I mean, last year you had Tim Settle, you had a little bit of Edwards, and you really didn't have much going on. You had Foley Fatukasi, who's back on the interior. The question is, how much better? Is Sheldon Rankins going to be, if you can get the Sheldon Rankins, and we'll just go to Sheldon Rankins now. We'll move him up on the list. But if you can get the Sheldon Rankins this year that you got in 2023, I think you would be thrilled. Now, how realistic is that? He's a year older. He was a little bit banged up last year, although it wasn't any ligaments or anything like that. If you get the Sheldon Rankins that you got 2 years ago, then yeah, it's obviously an improvement from what you had last year. But is that realistic, and is that going to happen? They damn sure didn't think it was going to happen in Cincinnati. And I'll say this: if you're getting cut by the Cincinnati Bengals as a defensive player, I know cap situations are such to where a lot of times it's misleading numbers. And we talk about Dalton Schultz really being on a 2-year deal as opposed to a 3-year deal. But if you're in Cincinnati and Cincinnati moves on from you, how much ball do they think you have? The other side of it is Cincinnati hasn't really done a good job of evaluating defensive players. So there is that. Then we have Tim Settle. And the joke with the previously mentioned attempt to get Eric Armstead was the Texans settled for Tim Settle. And early on, you looked at Tim Settle, and there were times where he looked good in camp, but you wonder, well, what is this guy really about? How good is Tim Settle? And he kept insisting in the locker room that, man, y'all are about to see something special. Y'all are going to want to interview me, and y'all are going to want to talk to me. And then I'll be damned, Tim Settle had some pretty good games. Now, there was one game where he had 2 sacks and a blowout, but after that, he was contributing in wins. And there was a stretch, probably for about a little over a quarter of the season, where Tim Settle was your best interior guy. And he was actually one of the better interior edge rushers for like a small stretch of time. But it did kind of feel like that kind of leveled out. And at the end of the season, Tim Settle kind of wore down. I also think there was kind of a blow to the ego, which he was not pleased with, where he said what he said about the Kansas City Chiefs, and he kind of tried to present it like it was misrepresented. I didn't think it was misrepresented, but it happened. I actually asked Tim Settle about it. He was, I think he was just upset that Chiefs fans were kind of getting on him, and there was the video of him chasing Patrick Mahomes. But you're bringing back Tim Settle. You're bringing back Sheldon Rankins. So the interior D-line, you're bringing back the band. Then we go to another edge guy, Derek Barnett. Derek Barnett, touchdown Barnett. There was a stretch last year where Derek Barnett had more touchdowns in the second half than the Texans did, and it was not quite that small of a sample size. Talk about a quarter of a season. It was about a quarter of a season as well. Derek Barnett, he's back. Really good reserve end. They get comfortable with these D linemen. What these utility D linemen, whether it's Rankins 2 years ago, whether it's Settle last year, Mario Edwards, who we'll get to in a second, they get comfortable with these reserve D linemen, and Derek Barnett, who's been one of the depth pieces for D'Amico Ryans, always seems to make those big plays when given the opportunity. He figures it out. I do think it's interesting that you kind of look at Derek Barnett as, okay, they must be really good at finding defensive linemen. You remember him kind of appearing out of nowhere when they went on the road against the Titans with Case Keenum at quarterback, and you're kind of like, who is that guy out there? It was Derek Barnett when Will Anderson was out. And now it's almost like, well, yeah, maybe they are, or they just fall in love with their guys kind of. But Derek Barnett's going to be back. We'll monitor what that looks like with him. Then Mario Edwards Jr. I was a little bit surprised by this. But Mario Edwards Jr. last year, a pleasant surprise. A guy whose role kind of increased once Danico Autry ended up getting suspended, because they actually changed his entire position on the roster randomly. And then you kind of realize, okay, well, Danico Autry is suspended, so Mario Edwards Jr. is going to do his thing. One of the stars of camp last year, quite frankly. And I thought this was a guy who maybe you churn the roster and you try to find another guy, like a young guy that you can get a lot out of. But apparently they like what Mario Edwards Jr. can bring. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how he fits in with what they do. But the theme continues with the reserve guys. They bring you back. 1-year deal, then a 1-year deal, and then they bring you back. Sheldon Rankins, bye-bye. Come on back. Tim Settle, he already had the multi-year deal. And then Mario Edwards Jr., come on back. That's just kind of how they handle the bottom end guys. And then this is one of the more interesting ones. As we go through the position series, Landry Locker holding it down for Cody Stutes here on SNL, 9 days away from training camp. Danico Autry. Remember when Nick Caserio said that this is a guy that you want by your side when you go in a dark alley? Danico Autry. By the way, he's turning 35 years old tomorrow. Danico Autry. The suspension last year, there was some time where he made some plays. There was all that talk leading up to last season where, Danico Autry can line up. He can line up inside, and, you can line up the edge guys outside. And there's a lot of exotic stuff that you can do with Danico Autry. I'll be honest. It felt like when you were watching Danico Autry, even before the suspension, it felt like this is a guy who was leaving everything that he had on the field just to try to get out there. And look, there's a lot of us in our 30s, 40s, late 20s. It gets hard to even get out of bed at times. I wonder how much Danico Autry really has left at 35. And when it comes to surprise cuts, I could see a scenario where maybe Danico Autry is that guy. It's going to be really interesting to see what he looks like at camp when camp begins. And quite frankly, we really haven't seen him on the field. We've seen him on the side field, and we've seen him suspended more than we've actually seen him out there. So how does Danico Autry fit in their plans? If healthy, and if you can limit the snap counts, then we'll see. But Danico Autry is someone to keep an eye on when it comes to guys that I guess you could call him a hybrid on the D line. Next one, Darrell Taylor. And I'm actually very intrigued by this. And this goes back to the notion that I feel like they can find guys on the street when it comes to DNs. I thought Darrell Taylor, if you kind of follow the money, they obviously liked him a little bit. He's been on a couple of teams. He was in Seattle and then he was in Chicago. Last year he only had a few sacks in 16 games. But before that, he had a 5.5 sack season. He had a 9.5 sack season. He had a 6.5 sack season. And if you look at what they were able to get from Mario Edwards last year and what they got from Tim Settle for that brief stretch, and I really don't have a problem with a guy like Tim Settle running out of steam, especially given, what you're paying him. You kind of get what you pay for. I could see Taylor ended up being a pretty good option at D-line. This is going to be a guy to watch. When you look at the guys coming in for Will Anderson and coming in for Danielle Hunter, Harold Taylor's going to be a guy to keep a close eye on. He's one of the guys that I'm really intrigued by. Then there's a young guy that I think if we're looking for upside, and it's really hard to find upside on this D line outside of Will Anderson. Solomon Byrd's been getting a lot of attention. And I don't want to completely buy into Solomon Byrd, but I don't want to completely dismiss it. Could Solomon Byrd be one of those guys that plays his way into being a rotation guy that D'Amico likes to shuffle in and out? I know there was the mic'd up video with Rod Wright, the D-line coach, talking about how impressed he was with Solomon Byrd. It just seems like it's a name that has hung around. And then you look up and you kind of see him making a play or two in mini camps and OTAs. Solomon Byrd, it's not extreme upside, but I do think it's upside worth at least looking at when it comes to a guy who could potentially emerge during this during this season. The Danico Autry thing is interesting. Marcus says on the chat, Autry is a year removed from a double-digit sack season. He's not going anywhere. It's 35, man. I mean, I would not be surprised to see him as a rotational guy, but I mean, you're going back. That's not like it was just yesterday. The guy was banged up last year. Once you start getting banged up in the 30s, like the suspension aside, the guy was banged up. I saw the way he was moving on the field, locker room, all that. He was banged up, and he is 35 years old. So I would not just say, well, he's a year removed from a double-digit sack season. We'll see what they think of him. Obviously, they liked him before, but we'll have to check that out when the time comes around. Shout out to Bob Tack for sponsoring the segment. We're going through the Texans position preview, holding it down for Cody Stutes. Bob Tack, I love them because they're local, and I love them because they don't leave you out to dry. There's some companies, big companies, that are in charge of safety for your company that they claim to get it done, but really all they do is they use AI, they take your money, they take advantage, and they don't give a damn about you. That's not the case at Bob Tack. Bobby's been in the business now for 45 years. His son, Reed, he's also been in the business for a while now. Give him a call, give him a text, 409-744-8225. Serving Houston and beyond. They got the maritime, the spill control, the trucking, gloves, FR coveralls, protective clothing. They got you covered. Call them, text them, check them out. You can go on the website at bobtack.com. You can text the number. Locally owned and operated, PPE related, oil and hazmat spill products. They got you covered, and they will take care of you, and they will deliver free locally, and they'll deliver all over the place. So check out Bob Tack if you want to get that done. Mike says Byrd could be a solid 5-sack guy. We'll see. I just want to see him make the team. That's what I would want to see. I want to see him actually make the team. Next player, Dylan Horton. So Dylan Horton's obviously been through a lot. They like Dylan Horton. I think this is not like one of the big time head-to-head battles, but if we're looking at guys with upside potentially emerging, I think we're going to have to look at the battle between Solomon Byrd and Dylan Horton and which one of those guys sticks out the most. And I think in preseason, those are the two guys that are going to have the most to gain. Because D'Amico likes to shuffle in D linemen. It's two young players. I could see a scenario where both are on the team. But if Solomon Byrd is going to make noise, Dylan Horton's going to be someone that he's kind of competing with. Casey Toohill, I really don't have much there. I don't think he makes the team. He's just kind of a body, but not much to say about him. And then Foley Fatukasi, he's back. How about that? What did we say about them being in love with the guys that they're familiar with? Foley Fatukasi is back. Last year, kind of banged up. Had some decent stretches. He is one of their better run-stopping D linemen. But Foley Fatukasi, we got to see what he looks like when he arrives at camp. These guys that are getting a little bit older, it can change at the snap of a finger. So Foley Fatukasi, I think they obviously like Sheldon Rankins more. He was kind of a default starter last year, Fatukasi. How does he fit in? Does he make the team? How much do they like him? Fatukasi being back, I'm going to be honest. I was a little bit surprised that they brought him back. And I was also surprised that Kurt Hinish survived. Kurt Hinish has those vibes of just a guy who just hangs around. Eric Murray went from being one of those overpaid guys and faces of the Easterby and O'Brien era to a guy who was kind of a little bit of a bargain until Jacksonville decided to money whip him and basically tell the Texans, that the Easterby O'Brien 2020 Texans, to hold his beer. Kurt Hinish is still on the team. What does that mean? I really don't know. Last year, he was injured at the start of camp, and then all of a sudden you look up and it's like, oh, Kurt Hinish is still here. There he is. Not really sticking out, not really making a lot of plays, but Kurt Hinish is still on the team. Then we have Keontae Hamilton, and Keontae Hamilton's an interesting prospect. He's a national caliber wrestler, and he's a guy who went to Rutgers, played for Schiano, who Nick Caserio loves. I think Nick Caserio called him one of the best college football coaches ever, if I'm not mistaken. I might be exaggerating. I think that's a quote, though, from Nick Caserio. But Hamilton's a guy, kind of a project. Maybe you can sneak him on the practice squad, but he's also a guy who, in the final preseason game, maybe we'll see what he's got. And maybe there's an iron sharpening iron element with Keontae Hamilton. But I was intrigued by what was going on with Keontae Hamilton. Then we have Junior Tafuna out of Utah. Interesting prospect as well. Wouldn't really expect a lot from him. And then Tommy Togiai is an interesting one because it felt like in limited sample size, he was making some plays last year. And in a D-line room where you're talking about some guys and how much they have left, I do wonder if he kind of emerges as a guy that D'Amico Ryans likes. I'm intrigued by him. It kind of had a little bit of a Derek Barnett feel last year. Derek Barnett in 2023 when he kind of burst onto the scene. And then Tommy T. But really, the D-line, it's you're a lead on the edge, and then after that, it's just kind of like, Tommy T kind of has a little bit of a, I don't want to say like a cult-like following, but there are some Texans fans who seem to want to see more from him. On the super chat, you ain't never hate. Swarm. HDAV Traveler says afternoon, my friend. We're going through the D line. We're 9 days away from camp. Cody is holding it down around town. The landlocked top 5 D line questions of 2025. Top 5 questions about the D line. Number 1. Does Will Anderson become elite? That's really one of the most important questions on the football team. One of the most important questions on this football team, does Will Anderson become elite? We talk a lot about the CJ Stroud contract being due after this season, or at least him being eligible for it. Will Anderson's in the same category. He was in the same draft. He was drafted minutes after CJ Stroud, and he also plays one of the most expensive positions in football. It is going to be fascinating to see how every car salesman's dream, Nick Caserio, handles these extensions. It's also going to be very, very interesting to see if Will Anderson does become elite, what that looks like. You've already given Danielle Hunter his extension, which is a 1-year extension, which means he's under club control for 2 years, 2025 and 2026. If Will Anderson becomes elite, you're going to be paying Will Anderson and CJ Stroud at the same time, and you're probably going to do some maneuvering to where you kind of separate that out. But Will Anderson becoming elite, not going to be cheap. And quite frankly, it's kind of a non-negotiable at this point. We talk about it like there's a good case scenario and a bad case scenario, but when you give up what they gave up for Will Anderson, eventually it's got to happen. It's just a matter of whether it happens this year or not. It's also a matter of if Will Anderson's able to stay on the field, which he hasn't been terrible at, but it hasn't been 100% consistent. So that's question number one. Question number two, can the interior do their part? We know the edge guys are elite, but the interior at times last year, there was times where opposing teams were running the ball probably a little bit better than DeMeco Ryans would have liked for them to do. And it's not like you invested much in the D-line. We talked about the fact that they get comfortable with their guys and they bring back the D linemen that in a lot of NFL situations you would perhaps see roster churning a little bit more. They get comfortable. Sheldon Rankins, come on back. 1 year older in a very blah year in Cincinnati for a number of reasons. Foley Fatukasi, banged up last year, 1 year older, come on down. Mario Edwards, kind of felt like you got as much as you could possibly get out of Mario Edwards. You bring him back. Kurt Heinisch, still around. Tim Settle, no problem with that. But starting D lineman, maybe the expectations jump up a little bit. Although he did say that he was kind of focused on his diet, feeling a little bit faster this year. But the D line, can they do their part? Can they hold it down? You know, and the other part of this is the edge guys. They're so good at their job that they probably make it easier for the interior D line to hold it down, which is why the Texans are probably comfortable not investing as much, on top of the fact that you only have so much you can invest at every position. And the D-line kind of took the back seat. You also have the elite corner duo and a really good secondary. So it's almost like you don't expect much from the D-line. But I will say, much like we talked about the tight ends last week, I think that D-line is going to be something that they're really going to emphasize and invest in next offseason as well, whether it's with a pick, whether it's in free agency. I don't see them like breaking bread for anyone, especially with the bills that they got due after year 3 for CJ and Will and the other guys that they're paying. But I do think that much like the tight end, the defensive line is something that they're going to invest heavily in. And I also think they kind of fell in love with Dalton Schultz and brought him back a couple more years. It's kind of what they do on the D-line, but they're not. There aren't any bad contracts on the interior D-line that you look at and say those are just really, really bad. They just really haven't invested as much. And hell, when you're investing what you invested in Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, that's maybe one of those examples of, I'll say it again, iron sharpening iron for DeMeco Ryans. Question number 3. Is there any upside outside of the elite edge duo? Where's the upside? In other words, their best football's ahead and you could see them being a part of things for a while. Is it Tommy T? Is that all you got? There's not really any upside, whether it's depth guys, like most of the depth guys that you like, which I like what Derek Barnett does. I like what Taylor does. I like the best case scenario with Danico Autry. I like what Tim Settle can do. I like Sheldon Rankins. If you give me what Sheldon Rankins was 2 years ago, that's fine. But how high is the upside on this D-line outside of Will Hunter and Danielle Hunter? Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. Excuse me. Where is it? Because I don't think it really exists. And you look at the wide receiver position, like there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of upside there. Like Christian Kirk could have a really good year. We know what Nico Collins does. And then the rookies, there's some upside there. Even Justin Watson, DeMeco Ryans is calling him one of the most consistent guys in the league. There's not a lot of upside. There's not a lot of young talent on this D-line to really get excited about. So that's question number 3. Question number 4. Nick Caserio said that if he was walking down a dark alley, he would like to have this guy on his side. And this guy's just a badass. He's everything, blah, blah, blah. Danico Autry. What do they do with Danico Autry? Is Danico Autry in a perfect scenario? What if Dylan Horton and Solomon Byrd have awesome camps and you feel like the previously mentioned upside question, the answer to that is Dylan Horton and Solomon Byrd. Do you move on from Danico Autry? How does he fit in? How does he hold up? 35 years old. He's turning 35 years old tomorrow. I'm not sitting here saying that's old. He's not even middle-aged yet. But in football years, when you look at how banged up he was last year and everything that he went through, it's a little bit old. How does that fit in? What does Danico Autry look like? There is a wide range of possibilities when it comes to Danico Autry. Like with Will Anderson, we're saying he's going to get better. Is he going to get this much better or that much better? Danielle Hunter. Is Danielle Hunter going to be Pro Bowl or is he going to be all pro? But he's going to be in that range. And he made it for the fifth time to the Pro Bowl. We have a pretty good grasp of what Tim Settle and Sheldon Rankins are going to do. They're both going to be on the team, and we've seen their best. And we wonder if it's going to be close to that or a notch below. I could see a scenario where Danico Autry gets cut, and I could see a scenario where Danico Autry is a very nice piece to the puzzle when it comes to the D-line. There's a wide range of possibilities when it comes to Danico Autry, and it's really just going to depend on how he looks. Like, do we go to training camp in 9 days, and do I walk out there and look out on the side field and see Danico Autry rehabbing to get back? I see him on the field. I know there's also the case that, well, you know what you're going to get with him, but they got to see him at some point. Like with how thin this D-line is, and we talk about the lack of upside. Can you have a guy that's only going to play X amount of games? Got to see what's going on with him. And I know a lot of people will say, well, he had the PEDs last year. I don't know that he was going to hold up the whole time. So Danico Autry, there's a lot going on there. I know Nick Caserio said he's a bad MFer. He said that he take him out in the alley and all that type of stuff. This is a guy that's badass. I don't disagree with that. He's also 35 years old, and he's also not getting any younger. Question number 5 on the D-line. Did they get too comfortable on the interior? And this is kind of connected with the churning. And I just get excited when I see D'Amico Ryans and company find a guy like Derek Barnett out of nowhere, or find one of these guys on defense, and all of a sudden you see him playing a lot of snaps. Like, is there too much of a comfort level at D-line where you're not necessarily increasing the upside and you're just going with what you know? I mean, we saw the Texans try, going back to what we talked about earlier, we saw them try to go get Eric Armstead. That would have been a mistake. And that if they would have went and got Eric Armstead, that might have been one of the worst contracts that they brought in. Fortunately for them, Jacksonville made the trade. And they did not get Eric Armstead, and they ended up getting Tim Settle, and they ended up getting a pretty good version of Tim Settle. But that would have been a mistake had they make that investment. And maybe that has to do with the comfort level that D'Amico Ryans has with D linemen. Maybe there's just a different way that D'Amico Ryans looks at D linemen than edge guys. I think eventually we get to a point where there's a little bit more willingness to invest. And when you hear him talk about D linemen, you can tell that he really values it, but there's also just a certain comfort level, a little bit of settling, which you might be able to do, especially when you've got those guys on the edge. So keep an eye on it. We'll see what the D-line looks like, but it's kind of the tale of two feels. You feel elite and amazing about the edge guys, kind of blah when it comes to the interior guys. But we'll see what happens in camp. The beauty of it is we don't have to wait that much longer for it to go down. It's going to be awesome. Cannot wait to see what goes down. Brandon says we're having Nick Cheap Serio turns into a good thing. Keep the Armsteads away. I don't know if that was a cheap thing or that was just kind of a swoop in type of thing. But we'll keep an eye on this. Marcus seems to have a big thing for Danico Autry. And they do too. They like Danico Autry. But we'll see what he does. I do wonder if Marcus and Danico Autry are related. If you are, very cool. And that probably means that you're a bad MFer as well. Appreciate everyone for rolling through. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like. Be sure to ride along. Cody holding it down. I think he's on a drug binge right now. Probably not. But always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. What is it this dude says? Eat good, sleep good, be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Appreciate y'all for rolling through.